Well, hey there, gang. It's Jim.
And Christy.
Jacobus with Your Marriage Matters podcast number 138. And, babe, if people listened to the podcast last week, then they cannot wait for us to talk about Fight Naked this week.
Such a great acronym.
It is a great acronym. I remember the first time we said it, somebody said, "What's your best advice?" We said, "Fight naked." It was like all ears. Everybody wanted to hear that. So,
well, we actually took the term fight naked and used the second part to be some mindsets to have.
Yeah.
And the fight part has like rules of engagement. So today we're going to talk about more the mindsets to have and some other things.
Yeah. And we actually cover that in the book. Show them the book. Yay. We got our books in. Oh, doesn't show up very well, does it? Pull it back. Pull it back. Here we go. Oh, well. How about that? Well, anyway, we got the book in, and we actually got to put our hands on it this week, which is one of the coolest things ever. And gang, as we talk about the whole idea of I am not the enemy this month, conflict and everything. Again, we talked a little bit about it last week from the standpoint of dealing with conflict, part of the deal. Maybe anything about this you feel like we ought to recover before we talk about Fight Naked?
Well, just that conflict is something that you have to master. You need skills in. I am not good at conflict. And I think people find that unusual because that's something that I spend a lot of time with on a daily basis, dealing with other people's conflict.
Right.
And I've had to explain to them in my personal life, I don't like conflict. I don't deal with it very well. I tend to be a conflict avoider. I want everybody to be happy. So I know for many people out there, myself included, conflict can be a difficult thing because I like peace and harmony in my life.
Right.
I don't like conflict. And that's why I think this skill set for me was difficult, but one that I also knew that I had to get better at. And I'm not saying that you like conflict, but you certainly don't.
I don't avoid it.
Yes.
You know what? Actually, the truth of the matter is I used to like it. All right. I grew up in a family, not of conflict, but of arguers and everything. And I would be energized by it. And then I got to realize the level at which I liked it is a lot like the level at which you avoid it, and both of those are unhealthy. All right, there's that level in the middle where we're not seeking problems, but we're not avoiding problems either. We want to be in that sweet spot in the middle. And I was looking at this saying it's part of the deal and it's normal. I was thinking about we're actually in the middle, gang, right now of creating a course. Going to be the first course that we roll out about using DISC personality styles. And how that impacts our relationship. And the D stands for dominance, I for influence, S for steadiness, and C for attention to detail. And that D is how we handle problems. Well, you handle it one way, I handle it another. That creates problems in and of itself.
Right.
The fact we're different. Our I is about the same, so it doesn't create a lot of problems for us, but it creates problems for other people because we talk too much. But if we didn't, we probably wouldn't be doing a podcast, not a dual podcast. S is the pace at which we do things, and you and I have completely different paces, but that creates conflict.
But in some ways, too, the fact that we're different can be a strength because we don't do things the same way. And now that we appreciate what the other person does,
that's the point of the whole course, is the fact that if we learn to respect the differences that we have, like in the S, the differences in pace, we learn to respect that, we both grow and get better.
Exactly.
And so, and then the C is our attention to detail.
And compliance, we're both
at the bottom of the C scale.
Yeah.
So that's why we have, CPAs and people like that to help us with all of that kind of stuff. So,
and another thing in conflict that I think we had to learn and appreciate, sometimes people come at conflict with win at all costs, or I've got my point and
guilty.
And so when somebody would be my objective, what I've been taught is because of competitive nature or any number of things, that if there's an argument, there's a winner and a loser.
Right.
And a lot of times if there's an argument and people are felt unheard or unloved, then both people are losers.
Yeah. And that's kind of why we came at this entire month with I am not the enemy. I am not the enemy. And again, we're just going to preview this. the end of the month, we're interviewing Ben and Megan Coleman, and their story is phenomenal. They're the ones that we first heard this. They take little sticky notes and write, "I am not the enemy," and put it on their foreheads in the middle of difficult discussions and things like that. But what they went through together and who they've become as a byproduct of that, you are going to want to hear that.
They are such awesome people. We're just lucky that they're going to be a part of the podcast and everything. So I'm so looking forward to it.
Talking about bright too. I mean, I'm starting to feel a little deficient here. Last month we had Matt and Julie, who are two of the brightest people you're ever going to know. This month we have Ben and Megan, who are probably two of the brightest young people I've ever met.
And then before that, we had Trevor and Katie, and their story was so compelling as well.
We're going to have to start digging for somebody in April. It's going to have to be really, really sharp people too. So, and again, we're going to talk today about this whole idea of fight naked and the entire acronym. Last week we shared the A is assume the best and how powerful that is. So when we look at NAKED, and by the way, let me just be sure I share this with you. Just doing it literally is not a bad strategy. All right. And you're right. Last week we heard a comedian talking about fight naked. And once they started using the methodology, the comedian starting all kinds of trouble just so they could fight naked. Now, that's not the idea here. And actually, we're talking about an acronym here. So why don't you start off with the N there? Because I think that is such an important piece to all this.
Well, I think oftentimes the N stands for nothing up your sleeve. And we come at things thinking, I have the trump card, or here's how I'm going to do things. And when we talk with people, I can't have anything up my sleeve. I'm not going to get you with this one thing that
Hidden
I know
agenda.
You're will throw us off course. When we talk about defense mechanisms, when we're in an argument, I can have, and everybody can have, defensive mechanisms in place because our bodies and our minds are designed to save themselves and protect themselves. So to say I have nothing up my sleeve, I'm not coming with, like you said, a hidden agenda or something that's going to sabotage the argument.
Yeah.
I oftentimes will ask couples, because I can do this too, is what are things that are typical of your arguments? Do you do things like bring up things from the past? Do you shut down? Do you tend to be one of those people who will say, well, you do it too, and compare and bring up multiple things?
What about isms?
Yeah. And so when we say nothing up our sleeve, we're really meaning that there's nothing there that I'm going to be taken off guard by, because you're going to throw something at me that's not germane to the conflict.
And we've decided in advance of that, before we ever have any conflict, look, when we have a problem, we're going to get shoulder to shoulder and we're going to figure this out together. And again, I think it's so important. We'll talk about this next week. The whole idea that we both understand we're imperfect. We both make mistakes on a grand scale, minor scale, every scale. And whenever I make a mistake, I so want your grace out of it all, that I want to extend that same grace. And so I don't want to have any ulterior motives, nothing up my sleeve, nothing that you have to go, okay, wait a minute, you just kind of ambushed me with that. I just think that is so important. We come into this transparent, and that we've decided we're gonna solve it together.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And the assume we talked about last week, but you said something that I think is so important, that kind of goes along with that: expecting the best.
Yeah.
Expecting the best, thinking that this person that I've chosen is not the enemy. Yeah. And we sometimes have to remind ourselves about that, because we can tell ourselves all kinds of stories and make it up in our brain that is not based on reality.
Yeah. So. And so the next letter there, the K, stands for keep things respectful. And again, we're very, very transparent about this. I grew up in a family where that was not the norm, that if somebody made a foolish statement or said something wasn't accurate, then we kind of buried each other, and it wasn't respectful. And then I brought that into the relationship, along with what you talked about last week, was a lot of past hurts and things like that. And came to some point in time, realized this is not at all going to help anything. As a matter of fact, one of the things I found out, and we run into people like this all the time, is by being disrespectful, raising my voice and all those kind of things. And the focus got off of the problem and onto my ridiculous behavior. And so keeping things respectful means that I respect your point of view. I expect you to respect my point of view. You don't have to agree with it, but we're going to keep the tone reasonable. We want to keep the tone effective. We want to keep our body language. Everything needs to say, I respect you. You're my love. I adore you. And in the midst of all this, we're going to work on this together. And so I think keeping things respectful is huge.
And if you find yourself where you can't be respectful because the emotions are too high or things are too raw, sometimes that's a good time not to continue in the argument.
Yeah.
We were talking about marriage myths, and one of them is don't go to bed angry. There is some wisdom in that it's teaching you to think about conflicts and try and resolve it before you go to bed. But sometimes if you're so emotionally distraught, it doesn't do any good to keep the argument going, especially when you find yourself being at that point where you're either too emotional to be respectful or you're so hurt that you can't, continue in that helpful tone.
And babe, this E here, you do that so well. Share everybody what the E stands for.
Engage in creating a positive outcome. We've oftentimes said when something's going on and I have a problem, I just want to share it with you. I don't need you to fix it. I just want you to feel what's going on with me. Maybe it's a problem you can't solve. Maybe it's something that's just the way things are. I mean, if 2020 has taught us anything, there's a lot of things in life that we probably can't control and we can't fix. And so to engage in that positive outcome, I think is going to be super important, because maybe I have the problem, maybe you have the problem, but together we're going to have to say, okay, how are we going to deal with this? Maybe it's a problem outside of either one of our controls, but we need to engage.
How are we going to knuckle down together and deal with it? Yeah. Yeah. And you said something really important there, and I had forgotten all about this until you said it. In general, folks, this is not across the board, but in general, when women have a problem, they want to be listened to, and men have a problem, they want to solve it. And so what happens, and we used to teach this all the time, is that if Chrissy has a problem, one of the questions I ask her is, do you want me to just listen to you, or do you want me to help you solve the problem? And most of the time, Chrissy goes, I just need for you to listen to me. Well, gang, and you'll read that everywhere, the advice, learn to just listen, guys. Well, you know what? There's another side of that coin. Women, you need to ask your husband, do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to help you solve this? And we'll go, no, I want you to help me solve this. And we have to develop those skills in both directions. I need to be able to learn to just listen without trying to problem solve. And you need to learn how to listen and be a problem of this problem solving, which you're great at, by the way, which is why I want you involved in all of that. And so there's that mutual respect that stands for engaging in finding a solution. Or sometimes it's just going, look, I'm not sure what we're going to do about this, but I'm here for you. I know you're here for me. Let me know if you need anything. Sometimes that's all we can do.
And sometimes in the discussion of it, we might not even know what the problem is, and we need to talk about it and process it. There's been a lot of times where I thought, and I heard myself say it, and then heard you say it back to me, and I thought, wow, that's not what I'm thinking at all. So sometimes just having people to say, okay, what's the best way to problem solve this? Teaching problem solving skills, conflict resolution, all those things are important in all relationships. They teach it in workplaces. They teach it in marriage. I think they should teach it in schools, because oftentimes I don't think young people are exposed to ways to work on solving the problem and keeping it respectful.
Yeah, and gang, we recognize this right off the bat. We grew up in two different households. You may not have ever witnessed anybody solve problems in a healthy way. And so you bring that into the marriage. And if your spouse has a different way that their family, just like our family, my family argues, your family tends not to argue and everything. And at first it's like, oh, what is wrong with you? How come you're not arguing with me? You're supposed to jump in here and argue with me, and you're not. And then I'm like, well, okay.
And I'll tell people, when our bodies feel like we're under attack, it goes into the reflex of fight or flight, freeze or fantasy. And I have a tendency in the midst of what I think is an attack, I'll freeze. I'll just, can't even think about stuff. I can't process things fast enough. And so it's important throughout the conflict that you're aware of what's going on. And once again, if you're in that state, it's probably not the best time to solve a problem,
Yeah,
unless,
that's a fact.
of course, the house is on fire, and then you have to solve that
Yeah,
problem.
well, and no, please don't freeze.
Yeah,
if
there
the
you
house
go.
is on fire. So and actually,
Yeah.
Christy's great in the difficult situations. We run into those traveling sometimes where somebody's hurt or needs help, and Christy's fantastic at that. And so the last one is develop a plan of action. I think way too many couples end up in a disagreement, process through the whole thing, but they never decide what they're going to do.
Right.
And then the problem never goes away. It never gets solved. We actually had a challenge the other day. You'll remember this when I bring it up, in that we were trying to solve a problem together. We're actually on the same page, but yet we said, hey, let's kind of sleep on this, and then we'll revisit it tomorrow and figure out what we're going to do. And then the next day we decided what we're going to do, and we executed it. There's nothing worse than going over the same problem dozens of times because we never come up with a plan of action. And that might be a financial challenge. It might be work around the house. It might be any number of things that create a challenge for us that we never solve, and then just keeps popping its head back up over and over again. For somebody who likes to solve problems like myself, that is like like chalk on a fingernails on a chalkboard kind of a thing. So what are your thoughts around the whole idea of developing a plan of action?
When we come to a point, and it can also be so process driven, that we've looked at all the data, we've looked at all the facts, and then we've kind of got to do something about it. It just can't sit out there if it's a problem that has to be solved. And so when we come upon it, and sometimes it's like, well, I'll do this and you do this. It depends on the type of problem, but I do think you have to bring it to the finality of, or here's what we're going to do. It might not, what we decide to do might not solve the problem totally, but we've at least got on the same page of it. I was talking with a couple, and one of the challenges was money. And her way of solving problems when money was an issue was to go to work and work hard and pick up extra time at work and everything. And his was to make sure that they had everything and go out and spend to make sure they had their needs met, like go out to grocery stores and stuff like that. And she was like, the worst thing we could do is this. And his thought was, well, why? That's not going to help that much. So get on the same page, decide on the plan of action, even if you plan you're going to do two separate things.
And here's something I think is important about that too. If we've done a good job, we've identified the problem, we create a plan of action, it's our plan. It's not your plan. It's not my plan. It's our plan. And here's why that's important. If it doesn't work, all right, then I won't go, I told you so. No, hey, look, babe, we agreed on it. We did the best we could. Sorry it didn't work out. What are we going to do now?
Right.
All right. Because you started doing that, then everybody starts keeping score. And then sure as heck, somewhere down the road, I'm going to be wrong. And you're going to go, yeah, told you wrong. And then that just doesn't go anywhere. That is what we're saying don't do. All right. I am not the enemy. I am not somebody you want to keep score against. Matter of fact, if we kept score, it'd probably be 578 to 576. One of us in favor. And, at the end of the day, we're both human.
Right.
We're human. We make mistakes, and we allow each other to be human. We allow each other to make mistakes. We join in the process of solving problems. And then when it doesn't work out, we're gracious. And that, to me, is what makes for that marriage we're talking about. So anyway, so there's your acronym: fight naked. Try the literal format of that first, guys. I really, next time, see how it works. Don't cause problems to get naked or anything. Last week we talked about assume the best. That's part of the acronym. This week it is naked, nothing up your sleeve, assume the best, keep things respectful. What was it, E? Engage in a positive result, and then develop a plan of action. Next week, we're going to give you two really cool strategies around all of this. One of them we learned based on an email that came across my desk that said how to solve every argument in 30 seconds or less. I'm like going, yeah, right. And I read it. I was like going, nope, that solves it. And then we're going to give you a tool we use all the time called Rate the Debate in next week. And then the week after that, Ben and Megan are going to be with us. We haven't seen them in a while since we left Sugarland, so I'm just anxious to catch up with them and see how life's going. Two of the coolest people on the planet. So, gang, always, we want you to remember your marriage matters. It matters in so many different ways. We believe it matters. We want you to believe it matters, and we want you to have that vibrant, healthy marriage that you dreamed of when you said I do. So we're here for you. Check out our YouTube channel. Check out the website. You can actually find this particular podcast and all of the resources that come with it at yourmarriagematters.com/138. We have a blog there with all of our former podcasts. You can search for topic matter there. At the end of the day, again, we want the best for you, and we want you to have the kind of marriage I think we've been blessed to have, babe. I can't tell anybody or everybody, and certainly can't tell you how much I adore you and how much I love you.
And I love you too.
Guys, have a great week.